Again, in the next iteration of these statistical tests, I'm going to do a little better job of higher quality graphics and those kind of things. I'm just sort of under a time crunch right now. Probably also get a model that looks a little better than I do, maybe. I don't know. I listen to these things, listen to myself, and I hear a bunch of uhs and okay, and I hope that you can see past that and pick up the information that I'm trying to share with you. Again, that's, I think, the important part. So let's continue on with the video that I made previously here and see what is there. Questions in this particular chapter. I'm going to give you some practice doing that, because I'll have, you know, some blanks in there where you go through and you have a study. I don't know what you're, you know, some sort of study, the XYZ study. And there's a blank for you to put down the null hypothesis. There's a spot for you to put down the alternative. And then from that, you can go through and you can identify the p-value. And then you'll be asked to tell whether it's a 1 or 2-tailed test. Again, and if you know the null hypothesis or the alternative hypothesis, then you can identify. We're going to identify the critical value. Now, typically in most of the research that we're going to see, it's going to be set at 5%. Although you can find some that are set at the 1% level or at the 10% level. So that's identified when you set up your study. And then, you know, you'll also be asked in these tables, these charts, to fill in the test statistic. And then you may in some of them be asked to give you the conclusion. Again, it's just another example of going through and saying, okay, this is one study and how it worked out, and then go through and you'll be asked to do the same thing for the ABC study, and you can see that they all followed the same type of a format, and they give you good information. Okay, so my 15 minutes are up. Okay, so we'll come back here to add a couple of things. Again, the purpose of this is not to go through and be a lecturer over the material. It's just to try to go through and fill in some of the gaps that might be more confusing. I do want to go back to something that may have that you need to understand again. Throughout the course, up to this point, we've talked about the z-score and how the z-score goes to and normalizes for the mean, and then you divide by the variance, or the standard deviation, and that normalizes it for the spread. Well, in this chapter, you'll notice that we use a t-score. Look at the similarities between these. Again, you take a value, subtract off the mean, and then you divide by a measurement of the variability. Standard error of the mean for the t is what is used there. Another thing that I want to go back to that we've covered before in the previous video, again, it's a type 1, type 2 error. So just want to go through and hopefully you didn't have any problem with this, but I want to. This is the table that was a similar table to what we had. The truth about the defendant, they're either innocent or they're guilty, and the verdict reached by the jury, guilty or not guilty. And there's 4 situations. If they're guilty, that the jury says they're guilty, but the person's actually innocent, or the jury says they're not guilty and the person is actually guilty. In both of these cases, an error occurs. Statistically, we would call this a type 1 error. and we would call this a type 2 error. But justice is served if the guilty is found guilty and if the innocent is found innocent. So a lot of the things that we're going to use or see in this course are actually used in the real world. You would use there. Excuse me. We also have got some information towards the end of this chapter on increasing the power of a statistical test. That's one of the ways that we cut down on the number of type 1 and type 2 errors, is we just increase the sample size, and that's important. You can change the significance level, and or if you're able to use a one-tailed test as compared to a two-tailed test, it also makes it, it gives you a little bit more statistical power if you're able to do that. So that, again, I don't want to belabor the point. I did want to get all that information in. This is the last part of this chapter, and again, hopefully it's been useful. And obviously, if you have some suggestions on how to improve the content of it, then let me know. So have a good day.